Joining us this evening on special broadcast is social activist and former California Senator Tom Hayden. Tonight he will discuss participatory democracy and the effects of the Port Huron Statement 50 years later. Over the years, you've been involved in a lot of activism. Was there a particular moment or a specific incident that really sparked your interest in all of these issues?
I grew up with my nose in books. I was curious George kind of guy, and it just happened that as I came of age, black students and some whites in the South were marching for civil rights or sitting in at lunch counters, and I was an aspiring journalist, as perhaps you are, and I felt the tension of writing about people who were willing to risk their necks for a purpose, and I was exploiting them for a byline. And very concretely, Martin Luther King was one of those people. So I would not say it was an overnight transformation. I would say it was a gradual change, but there were moments.
And you also participated as a freedom rider during the civil rights era. You were even beaten and arrested. What kept you going through all of that?
I think people just felt that it was a price that they were willing to pay, and somehow you felt that, in fact, maybe it wasn't really going to happen to you. Even when it did happen to our friends or to people that we knew, I don't remember anybody saying, "Well, I'm out of here." It was more like, "Forward, we have to go forward." And I think that's a function of being young and restless and unwilling to put up with what your parents left you.
One of the recent social movements that we've had going on is the Occupy movement that's pretty much spread across the entire nation. How would you compare that movement to some of the things that were going on back in the 60s?
Well, the Occupy movement is still going on, and I think it's created a lot of bonds and friendships among young activists that will last for a very long time, and I can't predict what its future will be, but that's an achievement in itself. If you go back a long time to the Port Huron Statement of SDS in 1962, you will find in a small footnote the assertion that 1% of Americans own 80% of the stock and the wealth. So we can say this is an issue that we raised and never resolved. So I think Occupy felt impelled, a necessity to do it, but maybe not necessarily a full comprehension of what they and we are up against with the 1%. That's why I think the September 17th Zagati Park or Washington, D.C. occupations were a kind of an opening announcement or a dramatic performance of protest and anger, but only the beginning of something which can be resolved, but I don't think it can be resolved soon.
And you mentioned the Port Huron Statement. Are there things that people involved in the Occupy movement can learn from that?
I think they already have. If you look at the first principle of the September 17th Occupy movement, it was participatory democracy, which comes straight out of the Port Huron Statement. Participatory democracy means that a democracy is not really fulfilling of human needs if people only vote or only write letters, that there has to be direct action and voting, and not just voting for candidates, although that's very important. Workers not only want better wages, but the only way to get better working conditions is by the participation of employees on the shop floor or in the office, because it's their place.
So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about your experience as a senator in California. From that perspective, what are your thoughts on the upcoming election in November and the current state of the economy and the government now?
I'm a supporter of Barack Obama, and I think that he's disappointed a lot of people. When I supported him, it was because of the civil rights movement, and also I said I won't agree with him on NAFTA, I won't agree with him on Afghanistan, but it's not that complicated. It's like walking and chewing gum. I can vote for somebody, but remain independent and have my own views. But I think that, disappointment aside, what has actually occurred is progress that's hard for people to grasp. For instance, numbers are always optical things that are hard to grasp. At the beginning of Obama's administration, there were 700,000 to 900,000 people losing their jobs per month. Now he has a small incremental gain of 100,000 a month. Not enough to keep up with the number of people that are looking for a job. That's an example of how something occurs. There's those 700,000 or 800,000 people are not losing their jobs monthly, but we don't see them. We don't feel it. Some things are visible. For instance, being from Los Angeles, I'm living in old Mexico in a way, and what Obama did with the executive order to stabilize the existence of undocumented students. I teach at UCLA. We've had undocumented undergraduates for a long time. They've been in the lead of trying to legalize their existence. And I think this executive order, if it holds, will make it possible for 1.7 million of those young people in the Army or in the universities to become American citizens fully employed and not living in the shadows and facing deportation. That was very visible. They came out in the streets in LA and in Chicago, but most of the time we don't even notice these things. And I think these are big accomplishments that people ought to embrace and not be wishful or delusional about how rapidly things change.
And one final question for you. If you had to give one piece of advice to students who are interested in being social activists and making a difference in their community, what would you say to them?
I would say read and never stop reading and question everything, and don't be just an observer, because by being a participant you change what you're observing. The way dropping a pebble in a pond changes the movement of energy.
All right, thank you so much for
You're
joining
welcome.
us today. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.